All right, breaking news. The jobs numbers are out, the lowest since, January of 2009.
7.8%. That politically is great news. However, though, you got to scratch your heads. 114,000 non-farm jobs added. You have to have 150,000 just to keep up with population growth. I'm not an economist, but this has to mean that more and more people, Miles Nadal, are discouraged and have just stopped looking for work. Because if you're not even having enough jobs, creating enough jobs to keep up with population growth, and the unemployment rate drops 0.3 percentage points, that can only mean one thing, right? People are distressed. The economy is so bad, they've just given up.
These are fungible. The unemployment rate is a fungible number. You need 3% GDP growth, as I said, to keep unemployment flat.
Right.
As Willie said, you need 150,000 jobs approximately to keep unemployment flat. Here, when you have 114,000, which is an anemic number in relation to where we were at 155,000 earlier in the year.
Right.
The only reason why the unemployment rate is lower is because you have more people that are structurally unemployed, you have more people that are permanently unemployed, and you have more people that are unemployed for more than 12 months.
Let's bring in right now CNBC's Brian Sullivan. Chuck Todd also still with us. Let's start, Chuck, with you. Another mixed bag. It seems all summer It's been a mixed bag politically for the White House, who's happy when the rate goes down for political reasons, but are very concerned by how weak the job growth continues to be.
Really is
and 114,000 is not good.
What's been interesting that we found in our that we have seen is these numbers seem to have a bigger impact on the tone of coverage for a day or two on the campaign, but the public sort of has already absorbed the economy through their own prism. And one of the things we saw in our NBC Wall Street Journal poll is that you have a partisan way of viewing where the economy is. If you've come to the conclusion you're going to be with the president, then you believe things are looking up. You believe the country's headed in the right direction. If you are decided you're with Romney, you think the country's headed in the wrong direction. You think so. We're seeing more of a partisan split a little bit. But you do have independents who have tilted toward believing the economy is getting better and things are recovering. And that was all of that bump had come basically since the Bill Clinton speech at the Democratic Convention.
And Brian Sullivan, we've got two different storylines here politically. 7.8, the lowest unemployment rate since when?
January of 2009.
January of 2009. That's something the president can brag about today. But, Brian, cue us in. It certainly seems to me that with the numbers at 114,000 continuing to be anemic, it's not good news for the economy.
It's not good news for the economy because, as we've talked about, you really need 125,000 jobs created a month to keep up with population and immigration growth. So there's not a lot of net new jobs added. But I will push back a little bit and say this. The number is good for the president, sort of to Chuck Todd's point, which is this. We could talk about the labor force participation rate until everybody's eyes roll into the back of their head and they keel over, right? It's something that's difficult to discuss. What matters is that headline number with a 7 handle, as they say on the street, 7.8%, right? Whatever the reason, the president can now say, I've brought the unemployment rate below 8%. I think that's a big win. I think it's a very important number for President Obama to have it sub 8.
Again, though, just to push back with you, though, Brian, the only reason that number went down below 8 is not because we're adding jobs to bring the unemployment rate down, but because people have stopped looking for work, right?
I agree with that. The labor force participation rate at 65.6% is awful, right? Absolutely agree.
Historically awful.
Why it's that low? Is it retirees? Is it kids that are 22 giving up? Who knows? But that's a harder political thing to sell than saying, hey, we're below 8%, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the headline that's going to matter to the majority of Americans that don't watch CNBC every day.
Brian, let me ask you a question. Don't you believe, as a leading indicator of the health and well-being of our economy, is much more about GDP growth than it is about the employment numbers? Because if you've got 1.3% GDP growth, you're almost at stall speed. You know that at 3%, you've got a reasonably healthy economy. Our GDP growth a year ago was double where it is right now. The momentum is negative. to me, that's a much greater indication about the health of the economy.
Right.
And where consumers should feel confident.
So Miles, let me cut in here really quickly because Mark Halperin, you are, and I want to make sure we have the source right. You actually have information that the participation rate did not drop.
It went up 1/10.
Okay.
But historically, it's still, very, very low.
Historically, it's low. But again, what do these numbers mean
it's
if
hard
you
to see
drop?
If you've got anemic job growth,
right,
lower
Long-term
unemployment, but more
unemployment.
people participating. I don't see how that adds up. The biggest thing politically,
It's bizarre.
The biggest thing politically is Republicans can no longer say 8%, above 8% is entire presidency.
Willie, what are you looking at right now?
Well, I was looking at the same thing as we were talking about participation. It says more people actually began to look for work in September. Now, it was at a terrible place the month before,
Historic, yeah.
but it has ticked up a little bit. So
But that's a big-
we have
big
some strange
overall
numbers.
But you also know that when people are unemployed for more than 12 months, they're eliminated from that calculation.
Here's the
So again, and that might, let's bring in Josh Green right now with Bloomberg Business Week. Maybe it's long-term unemployment. Josh, these numbers have always, the unemployment rate has always been confusing. Why don't you help us out since you work for one of the richest men in the
guys,
world?
Exactly.
I got to say, I got a much different take on the jobs report than you guys do. First of all, there were 418,000 new people came into the workforce in September. So this was not a case of the unemployment rate dropping because people were leaving. The other good news buried in this report is that the numbers were revised upward for July and August. So last month, if you guys remember, the headline number was 96,000. That's now been revised upward to, I think, 142,000. So what we're seeing, I think, behind the number is evidence of stronger job growth. Stronger relative to a lousy economy.
114,000, are we defining recovery down here? Because we've always heard.
Yes, I think that's a good point. We have been all year. But in terms of, this is right on the median analyst's estimate in the Bloomberg survey. And buried beneath there is some good news. Not just the headline number 7.8%, but the fact that the revisions are upward. That's the trend you want. That's the trend you're looking for when you're trying to discern an economic recovery. So I think all in all, this is probably good news for Obama, although not enough to overshadow his belly flop in the debate the other night.
For ignoring the politics of the headline for a moment, I guess my question is, if people think that this is a leading indicator the economy is strengthening, do you think there's a positive revision coming to GDP growth? And if not, then I believe these things are irrelevant. Until you start revising GDP growth positively to get up to 2.5%, 3% kind of growth, but at least going in the right direction. Don't you think, Brian, at the end of the day, these things are meaningless to the structural improvements of the economy?
I agree with you 100%, Miles, but I also think there's two issues that we seem to be debating here today, right? There is the actual economy when you dig down into the numbers, and there is the political perception of the economy, as Chuck Todd said, through the prism of everybody's own experience. And I'll sort of piggyback on what Josh said. Great points. The two most optimistic things I see as I dig down, the releases are just ridiculous. The government needs help in putting out these numbers in a more sensible fashion, which is the number of people that were unemployed less than 5 weeks dropped dramatically year over year, which says to me, if you lose your job, the odds of you getting a job quicker have gone back up, which is a good thing to avoid that long-term structural unemployment, Miles, that you were hitting on earlier. All in all, I would say it's a fairly positive jobs number. Yes, we have structural problems in the economy. 2% growth is effectively flat when you factor in inflation and everything else. But let's not confuse the debates. The real economy, the political perception of the economy.
All right, all the different layers of this, Mark Halperin, our long conversation about really the dismal state we're still in. Having said that, this number, 7.8, good or bad for the president?
It's great for the president.
Okay.
And if you go just based on Twitter right now and the people I follow who are conservative, they're about to make a huge mistake. They're going to say BLS numbers are horrible. Some people are already saying the numbers are made up to help the president politically. They have to find a way to talk about the economy and why Governor Romney would be better not to try to. It's exactly what they did with the polls for the last 2 months, to attack the methodology. These numbers are good. They not only are good symbolically, they represent the economy moving in a better direction.
Does it turn the page from a dismal debate performance, or does it?
I think it depends fully on how the two sides handle it today. It certainly is good news for the president, and it's good news for the country.
My concern is that I'm afraid that the headline is going to be viewed positively by voters, 7.8%. That big headline, even though I don't believe it's an indication of the true health of the economy, I'm afraid that that's going to be the thing that sticks in people's minds. And I do think it is positive for the president, because when he can say it's the lowest number since he took over and since January 2009. That's a very big positive.
Yeah, and you were holding up. Go ahead, hold that up for the camera. Drudge Report?
Drudge Report. Even the Drudge Report.
Okay, TJ, what do we got? There we go.
Even the Drudge Report. Very happy news.
Yeah, it is. So Willie, again, it is a confusing. It's confusing because we're told you have to get 125 to 150,000 jobs just to keep up with growth. And yet it goes.
And it didn't involve people dropping out.
114. Come on.
I think
somebody's got to explain it then. This doesn't make sense, Brian. This doesn't make sense if more people are looking for work and we're not hiring enough people to keep up with inflation.
And a huge drop.
And and you have a huge drop. How does that make sense? And the Labor Department needs to explain this to us.
I agree with you, Joe. We need to learn more about the people that are dropping out of the workforce, right? 7,600 people in America turn 60 years old every single day. So there's a lot of people that are leaving the workforce through natural demographic shifts. They are simply retiring. That's a very different situation than if a 22-year-old in their parents' basement has given up finding work, or the person who's been out of work for, more than a year says, forget it, I'm out, I'll never get a job again, or they can't get a job again.
Right.
And let's not forget, there's two economies here. If you have a 4-year college degree and are over 25 years old, guys, the unemployment rate is 4.1%. That is structural full employment.
Yes.
That's the key here. It's bifurcated economy.
Josh Green, how does this play into the other sort of narrative that businesses are so uncertain they won't hire? Does this affect
I think
it at all?
I think it really cuts against that, to be honest. And let's remember, one reason this number went down is because we didn't just add 114,000 new jobs. There were the upward revisions in August and in July. So we're talking well over 200,000 new jobs. I think that's evidence that business is getting off the sidelines, hiring. I mean, there's still big headwinds. You've got the fiscal cliff coming. There's all sorts of uncertainty with the presidential election. But all in all, good news.
All right. Wow. Brian Sullivan, Joshua Green, Miles Nadal, thank you very much as we cover this breaking news.
I don't mean to sound like the executive in Big. I don't get it.
Well, look, I don't get it. Just to give you clarity.
No. Again, somebody's got to explain the matrix by which they do this, and that's fine. The number goes down. It's good political news.
Joe, can I just say something? The smartest economists over the last 24 hours, a dozen of them said they think 113,000 to 118,000 new jobs, translated into 8.1 to 8.2% unemployment. Comes in at 7.8. The number came in right in the middle of it. It does not logically.
It doesn't make sense, and we're going to. It just doesn't. We'll figure out in a couple months.
Three variables that we know of. That doesn't.
It makes absolutely no sense.